Hello, peoples of the internet. Today we will be rebuilding the Tortoise. Here you'll see how it is in 1976. It's not a pretty car by any means, but it's an economy car, so I think we can just about get away with it. What we're going to do first things first is not that one. 1986 is going to be the year this time because we've somehow sold a trashy engine that only gets 15 miles per gallon for that long. We're going to keep the basic drive line the same. I think I'll just create a new engine this time. I should be able to. New family. I think we want an inline 4 though in this particular case, and we can have an aluminium head. This is going to be a lot more advanced, and so it should need to be if we're to get decent economy out of it. So, I have finally achieved an engine. It is a 1.7 litre inline 4 with an aluminium head and 2 valve per cylinders. It makes 90.7 horsepower. We've dropped 700, 800 cc's here, so you can't expect it to be perfect for power. We've dropped about 20 horsepower, but the economy has improved, as has the weight improved significantly, which is always a good thing to see. The compression is fairly low, and yes, it needs to be. It's economy bias on everything, really. We have had to even lower the RPM so I can keep the cast iron stuff and it's cheaper to engineer because it's got a lower engineering time. I really didn't need to go crazy though. It's not a performance car, so it's less of a worry if you miss out on a bit of power. We're also saving about 80 kilos on the engine, which should somewhat compensate for the lack of power. We'll let it run so you can hear it now. Now what I'm thinking I could do with this being the 80s, I could just stick a huge turbocharger on it if we have the menu. Come on, where do you hide these turbos? Yeah, I could stick a turbo on it, and that would make it more expensive and a lot more powerful, but as far as an economy engine goes, I think I've done a decent job. It's got more technology than the last engine, but it's smaller and lighter, so all in all, it should work. It's not that much slower, you'll see, with, well, only lost 4 miles per hour in total. And that's fairly impressive considering we've lost 20 horsepower off the engine. I'm going to keep all this stuff the same. The tyres will stay the same, 175s I think they were. I don't know, it's staying the same anyway as it is now. We'll go with long life, hard tyres, and we might have had alloy wheels before. I'm going with them now anyway. Slightly sportier alloy wheels, let's see. I think I might have had 14s before. Maybe? 15s look a lot better, but 14s are more functional. We're going with 14s. It's a functional machine. We'll go with discs on the front, perhaps. Or we could go drums all round. Now it's the 80s. We can have one piston discs and be all fancy like that. Make them quite large. They're still excessively large for this kind of vehicle, I'll admit that much. But hey, we do that with our brakes. Go over the top. We'll want a semi-clad under tray for engineering time, I believe the same as before. Now whether or not this chassis can compete, that's the other thing. It's 10 years later now. No idea how we would keep a car on sale for that long, especially one this dreadful. I'll also redesign the grille because that one is clearly forcing too much air in, and I do want it to be more aerodynamic. I do want it to be more efficient in this particular case. The other car I didn't bother too much because it was ultimately a uneconomical V6, so you know, you learn to accept that when the engine is something like that. We can have 5 seats, I think. It's not a tiny car, so we should fit them in just fine. Premium interior, same as before. Premium cassette. And we'll have the assists. because people can't drive. The safety, I have to say basic 70s, I think, because I don't know. It's 70s safety I want, so I'll have to go with basic 70s. Although it was standard 70s in the original car, because I wanted to be basically an updated version, but the same chassis, the same body and all that stuff. We can go with some fairly standard springs, but because we're updating an ultimately very primitive suspension system, I think I'll go for progressive springs and gas monotube dampers to help bring the comfort up to a improved level and hopefully compensate for the actual suspension technology itself being inferior. You'll see the weight is about the same as before, so we've done something right there. Although it feels strange because if anything it should be lighter just thanks to the engine being so much lighter than it was in the 70s. The weight balance is better, I'll give it that. Maybe it's just the extra equipment and luxuries you get in the 80s. The one last thing we've got to adjust now is the transmission. It's taken more speed, but if I have the aerodynamic improvements that should compensate. So I'll finish all that and then I'll return to this menu. Okay, so what I've done here is I've removed the front grille and just added a pair of vents instead, which dramatically reduces the air going into the engine, but then it doesn't need any more, so I can get away with that. And if we look at the gearing, it's a 4-speed manual transmission, fairly standard transmission, and we lose 1 mile per hour over the old car. And that's not bad at all, actually. We lose acceleration, but you're always going to lose acceleration with a drop in power. I think it's quite impressive that it's been able to have this drop in power and not lose all that outright speed. Also, if we look at the miles per gallon, it's approaching double the miles per gallon I was getting before, and 1 second slower to 60. So even if this isn't the best engine in the world, I think thanks to the higher performance on the low end, it is holding up surprisingly well against the old engine. There is a lot of wheel spin due to the way I've geared it, but I say a lot for an economy car. I'm sure it won't be too much of an issue. Even by modern standards, this isn't a particularly slow car, 11.5 to 60. Definitely not fast, you can't stretch it to say it's a quick car, but to call it slow, you know, you're stretching it a bit against all the MPVs and things and super minis. It's not bad in that respect. Now, I'm interested to see how this will do around the track, because we have got a drop in power which should punish this, but as we've seen with the refined aerodynamics, just looking back so I can show you, we have got less force acting on the front. It should be a lot more slippery through the air. Just whether that's enough to compensate for the power is the question. I would say I could reduce the entertainment, but there is absolutely no need to do that, so I'm not going to bother, because even if it's slower than the old model, it's an economy car, who cares? We're under a ton, so it's still not a ridiculously heavy car either. For the 80s, it's maybe not the lightest car around, but it's not particularly horrible. So I'm going to set this car off and return when it has a lap time to speak of. So I return with a time and a name for the vehicle. We'll see. Here's our car. It's called the Tortoise V2. I mean, what else do you call an updated version of the Tortoise? But I'm procrastinating. The time which I must get onto is very slightly, as in 0.08 seconds quicker than the standard version of a Tortoise. Not an impressive lead, no, but it leads, and it leads with 20 horsepower less. So if that's not evidence that this has got better, I don't know what is. The problem is, I guess, from a consumer standpoint is, firstly the price. It costs $1,000 more to the consumer. And secondly, we might have the Rover Metro syndrome, as I've inventedly named it, which is people may just see an old car in this, even if it is new underneath, even if the suspension system is completely retuned underneath and with better technologies in there, people will still see a 70s car. Also, I had a 5-speed, did I? No. That's a number of seats. Someday I'll learn these things. Someday. Still, miles per gallon. Look at that somewhere. Wherever it's hiding, it's somewhere around here. 30 miles per gallon almost. It's not that impressive for an 80s car, but it's no longer the embarrassment the standard Tortoise was. It's now an entirely reasonable kind of economy level for a car of this era. It's about the same weight. It may be slightly lighter. I'm trying to remember. I think it was 998 kilograms for the old model, but it's so close it's not going to make a difference. The power level of the engine is a different unit completely though. The torque peaks earlier, which if anything is a revival in the lack of power. The fact that the limited torque you have comes along sooner to swoop the car along. It's still struggling and it's still a second slower to 60, but it proves round a track that it's a better optimised car and that it's more capable. So I'm happy with it. And I think I'm going to leave you with a shot of the basic chassis and say goodbye until another day.